Performance time, come on and run some tests. We're going to find a memory leak. I've got no friends but virtual users. Soak test never end, it's performance time. Hello and welcome to Performance Time, the series where we look at the basics of performance testing with a fresh set of eyes. Today the question is, what is a load testing tool? So we've talked about what load is. We understand that. It's about concurrency and throughput and the nature of the load we're applying. We've talked about performance testing and how load testing is a subset of performance testing in which we are simulating volumes of load. So a load testing tool is, of course, a tool which allows us to simulate load on a system so that we can observe its performance. And many load testing tools all load testing tools have some basic core features which I would always expect. One of them being some ability to simulate concurrency, concurrent users, concurrent threads, concurrent requests coming in at the same time. If we can only simulate one thing happening at a time, we're not really able to simulate load in all senses of the word. The second thing we need to be able to do is to control the throughput. We should have some kind of workload scenario, something that relates back to a real business event, and we want to simulate that level of load. If we can't control the throughput, we can't do that. So we need to be able to control that throughput. We need to be able to measure response time. How fast are these things which we're simulating happening? Whether that is an API call or a page on a website or some kind of user action or interaction. We want to know how long it's taking to capture those times so we can analyze them later. And pretty much we have to have some kind of way to handle dynamic content. So this is when you have, say, a session ID coming back from the server and we need to capture it and use it in our requests. As a simple, common example. Or maybe we are generating an insurance quote and we get given a quote number and we need to take that quote number to the next phase of our test in order to actually generate an insurance policy. So if we can't handle dynamic responses coming back from the server, we're not going to be able to do very much at all, apart from test static web pages, if that. So these are what I think are the absolute core fundamental features of a load testing tool. And I'd be interested to hear what else you think is core. But then we have some optional extras, and many of us expect these things from our load testing tools. But I would say that as long as a tool can generate load on a system so we can observe its performance, it's serving its purpose as a load testing tool. So the first one is we often expect our load testing tools to provide some kind of results analysis. And this could be a dashboard, it could be a pre-generated report, or it could be a rich interactive system of visualizing and analyzing data. And we often completely expect that. Now, I think that there are, from my experience, tools which are better suited to the job than our load testing tool to do that task. But many of us rely on it, and so I've put it down as an optional extra. Server monitoring. So this is the basic monitoring of CPU, memory, disk and network on the servers that we are testing against. Now, of course, this is changing. The more we move to the cloud, the less we monitor servers in that basic resource level way. Non-standard protocols. So almost every load testing tool by default captures HTTP traffic and then plays it back and allows you to simulate that kind of activity. Basic web stuff. But there are only some commercial tools, mostly commercial, which allow you to test what I call bespoke protocols. And the examples here I've given are SAP and Citrix. And there are also protocols which go over HTTP, which you would struggle immensely with a standard load testing tool, such as Oracle Forms or Adobe Flex. These are protocols that go over HTTP, but if you looked at the requests, all you would see is a bunch of binary code without having some way to decode that. And that's what commercial tools can provide you. And in the current day and age, there is a real desire to be able to use UI level automated functional tests to generate load for a number of reasons. One, it can cut down on the scripting effort significantly, and two, it can, and there's some huge caveats around this, but there is the perception that by doing this we can capture the client-side rendering times as well. But of course, often we're testing using a headless browser, which behaves differently on just one set of hardware, and there are so many things to consider around that. But that's the perception anyway. So some way to generate UI level load, such as JMeter hooked up to Selenium WebDriver or Load Runner True Client, some way to do that is an optional extra, which many of us look for. So here are some example tools that I have used in my career, or at least have had significant exposure to. So I started my career on Neoload, which was, I suppose, quite unusual for performance testers. So that's the first thing I learned when I started as a junior performance engineer 11 years ago. And then there are the big commercial tools such as Load Runner, which of course everyone knows and loves, and some of us don't love it as much as others. And Sil Performer and Rational Performance Tester, also big commercial tools which support a lot of these bespoke protocols. Everyone's favorite open source tool, JMeter, which I use a lot at the moment because it does what I need it to do. Visual Studio was the tool I probably have used the most in my career, the load testing component of Visual Studio. Unfortunately, Microsoft has pulled it from the market as of the end of this year, so we won't be seeing much Visual Studio in the future. Gatling is another open source tool. It's much more basic than JMeter. You need to write code to generate your tests, and it has some quite good reporting though. I think it's more focused around API level component sort of performance testing. I wouldn't recommend it for big chunky end-to-end suites. And then there's services / tools like BlazeMeter or Flood, which fundamentally are really load generation from the cloud, but they have other features built on top of them to the point in which they become standalone load testing tools in their own right. So that is hopefully a nice clear description of what load testing tools are. In the next video we're going to look at how load testing tools work, and I will see you then.